Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a Q&A episode, and I have four questions today that I'm going to go over. And I really liked all these questions. There's a lot around like fat loss and refeeds and how often to fat loss diet, maintenance calories, like just stuff that's right up my alley here. Also, I'm going to get a good episode today, at least you should, to usually just have one thing of espresso, but today I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna do two. Allie's working and try and get some more focus type work done, record some stuff. And so you guys are gonna get the benefit of that. I may speak a little bit faster than I already do. I will say that's the biggest complaint, I guess it's complaint I get from people is, hey, you talk super fast. Sorry, that's just how I am. I haven't gone recently, but at least since Colby was born, but I do Toastmasters. And every single time I'm like, hey, watch this. I'm always told that I speak too fast. And then every time on the review, they're like, you definitely speak pretty quick. That's just kind of how my brain works. I'm just like, go and like beforehand, I'm always like, all right, I'm going to just slow down. But I just want to get my point across. I want to say what's on my mind. And sometimes I have a hard time like breaking that down and slowing it down. So that's just how I am. That's kind of how my brain works. That's how I am in my day-to-day life. So we'll see what it's like on 2 shots of espresso today. Make sure to take a deep breath. All right. So how long and how many times a year should you do a fat loss diet, cut, whatever it may be? So I kind of have my rule of thumb here is eventually I want to get clients to a point where we're just fat loss dieting less than 3 to 6 months out of the year. Okay. The rest of the time we're not necessarily trying to gain weight, but we're at least fueling ourselves enough, right? We're at maintenance, and that's going to help with building lean body mass, putting your body in a comfortable position where it feels good, where it's going to perform optimally. And obviously within that period of time, we're making sure that you're eating enough protein, still lifting, getting in good food quality, continuing to build habits that in turn will help you in your later fat loss phases. A lot of times with clients, what I see is they'll come to me and a lot of times we're going to start with at least like a small deficit. That's usually what we're working on initially, unless a client specifically says that they want to, hey, I want to gain weight, I want to add muscle. All right, we're probably not going to be in a deficit and then we may find that initially you are in a small one. And I always find that like for the majority of clients, at least 50% of them, that like initial fat loss phase, for some, they're good to go. They don't really have too many bumps. But I always find that first fat loss phase, there's a lot of bumps in the road and a lot of plateaus, where in the past, people run into those plateaus, they make some sort of adjustment or they just give up. But again, the first time I just see it just end up being a little bit slower than they want. Again, that could just be, they could be adding lean body mass, or maybe, again, they're overlooking things, or maybe their body's just not in a great spot to drop body fat. But then once we go through these phases where now we start to get them to eat a little bit more, continue to work on habits, each like subsequent fat loss phase is more effective and efficient. Like it just happens quicker, it's more efficient. And again, I attribute it to obviously the behavioral side of things, working on habits, adding muscle. But again, it comes down, and that goes hand in hand with this, but it comes down to taking that time away from fat loss. So in a perfect world, eventually I want to get a client to no more than 3 to 6 months out of the year of fat loss dieting. For example, I haven't done a fat loss phase in 1.5 years, and I'm probably going to do one soon, but I don't know. I'm just not super thrilled to do one right now. And I feel fairly good about my body composition, all things considered, with having a new child and everything like that. But anyways, so that just to give you an idea of where I'm at with that and what that may look like eventually for you. Now, obviously I've been doing this for a while, and so I think it's a little bit different. But at the end of the day, a lot of people they've been doing it just as long as I have. And maybe you've been doing it even longer than me. And so again, hopefully for you, you are at that point. If you've been doing it for 5+ years now and have really had good strategies in place and have been super consistent with weight training, getting better at your nutrition, and you feel like you need to fat loss diet more than that, talk to me because we need to figure that out. So again, eventually I want to get clients to that point to where it's no more than 3 to 6 months out of the year. And maybe it's even less than that. Maybe you're going as long as I am without fat loss diet. But initially, when someone is at higher body fat levels, you may diet more than this. Okay. So this is where so I'm going to continue going into this, but it is going to depend on where you're at. So if you're at higher body fat levels, you may be dieting longer than this and more often than somebody who is leaner and has been doing it for a little while. But from there, how long and how many times a year is going to depend on how quickly you drop weight at one time, how much weight you have dropped recently, and your current body fat levels. So with that, again, the quicker we drop weight at any one time for extended periods of time, the shorter you are going to fat loss diet. You're going to run into a lot of diet fatigue, calorie deficit issues with that approach. Again, my views of this have changed. I definitely was like more gradual, but I think that I know, and we have a question about aggressive dieting today, that these approaches can work. But again, it's harder, and you want to be looking out for some things, which I'm going to go over in the aggressive dieting question. And Yeah, you have certain things that you need to be watching for and are making sure that's in your plan. And it's just a little bit tougher to do it. And again, you don't want to push too long there. So that's going to already right there be like, it's hard for me to give you an exact answer because someone who's dropping less weight is going to be able to go at it a little bit longer. And then also, what have you done recently? Have you recently lost 10% or more of your body weight? Have you not? Again, that's going to determine how long and how many times a year we're going to do a fat loss phase. And then your current body fat levels. Again, these are all going to be things that we're going to take into consideration. And then obviously goals as well too. Are you trying to get super lean? Are you just trying to get somewhat lean? Do you want to build more muscle, then get lean? What does that look like for you? And so I think that's super important to know where someone's at. So for example, someone who has higher body fat levels, okay, again, just higher in general, you have body fat to lose. You haven't lost weight in years, okay? So it's been 5+ years since you've lost any amount of weight. And you're losing slowly, say you're losing like less than 0.5% of your body weight per week, you could probably be in that deficit for a year or more realistically. Again, it just depends, right? We would look at your biofeedback. Also, would we implement refeeds, days at your maintenance, diet breaks? What does that look like? Like that, these are all going to be things that we're taking into consideration. Then you compare that to someone who is a little bit leaner. They've already lost 10% of their body weight and they're going a little bit quicker. They're going to be dieting for a lot shorter time. So again, it really is dependent. People want an exact answer here. Hey, how long should I fat loss diet? How often? And again, it really depends on what you're doing. The key though, what you want to be careful with is like in that example where I'm like, hey, you could realistically be in a deficit for a year longer, is we want to look at your biofeedback. We want to make sure you're feeling good. If you're starting to diet for say 6 months and cravings are super high, you're feeling like crap, training's starting to suffer, we probably need to get you out even though you're not necessarily at your goal weight yet. Okay. So again, you can see where for some people initially when they get started with me, it may only be 3 to 6 months. If they were with me for an entire year, it may only be 3 to 6 months or less that you're fat loss dieting, depending on all those things. Or it could be, hey, the entire year you are technically dieting. And then as we move further along though, and you continue to get leaner, at some point I want to get you to where you're no longer dieting for more than 3 to 6 months out of the year. There's no need to. It sucks. That's a crappy way to live. And again, that's anytime I get asked this question, it's just very context dependent on what is going on. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more insight into what that may look like. But yeah, it's hard to give an exact answer. And those would be the things I would look at. I would be looking at. So just for example, I've had multiple clients where things have just been a little bit slower. And why would I, whether it be like just adherence thing or just personal choice of what they want, for them, it's like we're still like with them, they're just going to be in that a little bit longer. And again, there's maybe, hey, they have 2 to 3 weeks where they push, and then they have a couple weeks where maybe they sit back a little bit, right? There's no right or wrong, and those are all going to be things that would impact that. All right, so let's go on to the next question there. I feel like I really summed that one up. Sometimes if you listen to this regularly, sometimes I'll try to continue to make my point on things, and it's okay, dude, you made your point, move on. You don't need to keep hammering it and keep like sometimes just want to squeeze every last little bit out of it that I can. And yeah. Anyways, all right. So what do you consider maintenance range pounds wise? 1 to 4 up from end of cut? Question mark. Again, this is another very context dependent thing. Okay. So ideally you're going to say you drop weight, you're in your deficit. Now you're like, all right, I'm going to increase calories. Where people get themselves into trouble is that initial calorie increase. They are very scared to increase calories because usually in that situation, you are going to gain a little bit of weight. Okay. And people automatically think that's body fat. So then what happens is people end up being in this kind of artificially low maintenance calories because they're scared to see their weight come up at all. And then that just leads to them spinning their wheels over time. You're not feeling good. And that can lead to issues down the line, right? If you're not giving yourself enough micronutrients, the longer you're in a deficit, and if you're missing out on micronutrients and not sleeping well and really trying to push training again, that's not going to be great from a lean body mass perspective. You're not going to build anymore. So you're going to feel like you're spinning your wheels. This can lead to hormonal imbalances. Your thyroid can decrease, which is going to impact your energy expenditure and just how you feel from day to day. It's going to impact your gut health. So again, people get themselves into trouble here and because they see their weight come up a little bit and they automatically think, oh, my maintenance weight should be X amount of or X amount of weight. And if I'm gaining more than 0.25%, because that's what people say on the internet, that means that I'm gaining a ton of body fat. And it's again, you're not going to gain body fat in that short amount of time, especially if you're tracking. I feel like a lot of times this is more so people freak out about these things because it's more so about what they're doing than anything, right? It's if you just go out and just go crazy with it, it's like, what did you expect with that? There's nothing wrong with your calories. It's your actual choices that you're making that are the big issue there. Anyways, so after increasing calories post-cut, you may see a small weight increase. And this is probably going to happen more times than not. Sometimes I've seen it not happen, but eventually it does happen anyways, but you may see a small weight increase due to higher carb intake, higher sodium, and just overall food volume. Again, this is not body fat gain, okay? So you're going to see that initial increase. That should not be your sign of, oh crap, I gained 3 pounds of water weight. Now I'm all of a sudden gaining all this body fat. Now I need to decrease my calories. I overshot my maintenance. No, that's not the case. You need to let your weight stabilize. And as long as you are staying course on things in terms of your nutrition, you should be good. Again, this comes back to what I said, where most people, it's more so their habits. And then and that in turn, it's like they're frustrated with themselves and they blame it on the calories. So again, we need to look at what we're doing. If we stay the course on what we're eating, we just slowly increase our calories from there. Again, you need to let your weight stabilize. Give it a couple days to stabilize. Again, if you make small increases, I promise you, if you're quote unquote I don't know why I said quote unquote, but if you're eating 1,500 calories and then you go to 1,900 to start for your maintenance, again, maybe you're going to end up being a little bit higher. The likelihood of you increasing by 400 calories, it's not going to add body fat. Again, it's more so the other stuff that you're doing, or maybe you're not tracking everything, or maybe you had a couple meals where you were off track, whatever it may be. So once your weight stabilizes, give it a couple days to do that, maybe even a week or two. But again, if you're staying on track, that you shouldn't be worried about gaining a bunch of body fat. And if you're weight training, etc. Once your weight stabilizes, a reasonable maintenance range is about plus or minus 2.5% from that stabilized weight. Again, this is just a crude number though. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be that. Again, your weight may stabilize for a couple weeks. It may take a couple weeks to stabilize. This is why progress pictures, measurements, and again, working with a coach helps, because a lot of times we can get in our head like, oh, hey, I gained a couple pounds. And then in turn, you just start to spiral out of control. And that leads to you thinking you're going backwards. And two, when you add more food, you may feel like you have more food in your belly. And then in turn, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm gaining all this weight in my midsection. Again, that's not the case. So again, this is a crude number, but about 2.5% plus or minus. Now, we want to look at trends, okay? So we want to look at trends over time. So what I mean by this is 2.5%, that's a pretty big range, especially if we're looking at our weight averages for the week. And what I mean by that is, what I have clients do is we take our weight 3 times a week, pre-food, post-bathroom, pre-food or drink. It just flows off way easier. And then you take your scale weight, and then you take the average of those 3 weigh-ins, and that's your number for the week. That's the number we're looking at. And then we're looking at trends over time. I don't care if one week you were at 165.6 and then the next week you're at 166.2. I'm not worried about that. Where's it going? If the next 3 weeks it continues to trend up, okay, you probably need to make an adjustment. Again, this comes back to, if you're doing the things that you know you need to be doing, you shouldn't really be overly concerned about this. Again, it comes back to, most of the time people are not adherent to what they're doing, and that ends up really being the issue. It's not your calorie amount, it's what you're actually doing there. And again, in this situation too, somebody will drastically change their food choice and they're eating more calorie dense foods, which again, we want you to have a little bit more, but when you drastically change that, you're going to feel like you're eating less food, but you're probably consuming more calories. So you have to be careful here with that. But again, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at trends. We're not looking at 1 week from the next. It's trends over time. And that's what the number that I'm looking for. Again, somebody wants an exact number. It's hard for me to give that to you, because it's going to be based on your body weight. It's going to be based on how your body responds to how depleted you were. Again, if you're someone who is super depleted, like you were super aggressive with your fat loss and you depleted yourself, you were super lean. Again, that's going to be different than someone who was a little bit more moderate, has higher body fat levels, right? Like, the differences are going to be massive there. And again, body weight's going to come into consideration, genetics, all these things are going to just play a massive role in it, stress, like all of them, right? So it's hard to give an exact number, but those would be the things I would be going off of there. But just be careful with getting yourself into that trap of, hey, weight went up 2 pounds from one day to the next. Oh crap, I'm in a surplus. Now I need to decrease my calories. And then you end up staying in this artificially low maintenance calories, which leads to issues down the line. And this is something that recently autoimmunity issues, right? Again, Hashimoto, stuff like that happens a lot more to women. And a lot of times it has to do with your hormones, the balance of your hormones. And this can get out of whack if women, and again, women in particular are going to be they're the ones that probably are going to fall culprit of this most of the time. Again, this can lead to these issues from, like, you can get a small hormonal imbalance, and then over time that can start to exacerbate, and then that's where you lead to these issues, right? So you already are at a higher risk by being, for women in general, but then usually women are going to be the ones that fall prey to this type of thing and scared to see their scale weight go up at all, and that can lead to these issues down the line there. All right, so next I'm going to dive into the aggressive dieting one here. So thoughts on aggressive dieting for women in general. Again, we're a little theme here today. So I do think that we can do I think aggressive dieting can certainly work. I think quicker approach versus a slower approach. Again, each one has its pros and cons, and both can work. I just recently came across some research that showed that basically weight regain really had nothing to do with the rate that you went at. It just, again, mostly had to do with behaviors and then how much weight you lost overall. how much body fat you lost, right? So again, whether you went there a little bit slower, went there a little bit quicker, that was not what was at play. Again, it mostly came down to behaviors and then how much weight you lost. So obviously, the more weight you lost, the higher the risk you are of gaining more weight afterwards, which makes sense, right? You lose more weight, you have a bigger buffer to go off of, but you're still going to be at a higher risk of gaining a little bit more there. Okay, that's my thoughts on that. But we can definitely make aggressive dieting work. And at the end here, I'm going to go over 3 things that we want to have if we take an aggressive approach. And again, what is an aggressive approach? Just think it's just the quicker the weight loss is, that's going to be a more aggressive approach. I don't want to get caught up in exact numbers here because it's just already hard to actually get into a deficit and to just get bogged down with like numbers. It just can be too much at times. And I definitely fallen prey to this and giving out these numbers when at the end of the day, I get you have to do it for research and stuff like that. But yeah, it can just sometimes be a little bit overwhelming. Just again, just generally just think the more aggressive you are, the quicker the weight loss. That's what we're looking at here. I think aggressive dieting is a better strategy for men versus women in general. Okay. Women just tend to have this like larger stress response to a calorie deficit. Okay. And I don't know if that's just from the fact that women need higher levels of essential body fat. So it's like anytime you start to lose body fat, your body's, whoa, what's going on here? It makes sense. Women need to reproduce, right? They have to carry baby. They have to be able to feed that baby. They have to be able to produce the food to feed that baby. So for women, essential body fat is just a little bit more important than it is for men. And again, that's just stored energy on the body. So again, it seems like for women, anytime they lose body fat, there's just a larger stress response to it. The body's kind of, it's going to slow things down. It's going to make sure that you really don't lose too much body fat because again, the body doesn't know that, hey, there's abundance of food around at this point. It's just, again, going off of thousands of years of evolution and everything like that. So women just tend to have this larger stress response to just fat loss dieting in general. Okay. And again, this response becomes more pronounced as the deficit increases, especially when someone is already lean. So the leaner we are, the larger the deficit, the more we're going to have this stress response. And what does that show up as? Again, probably low energy, high hunger and cravings. You just like your weight will not budge. Again, you have total like large stress load, right? So again, for some women, that's again, if you're at low body fats, that's a stressor on the body. A deficit's going to be a stressor on the body. If you're not getting in enough micronutrients, that's going to be a stressor on the body. If you're not sleeping well, that's a stressor on the body. If you are highly stressed, that's a stressor on the body. If you're also training super hard, that's going to be a stressor on the body. And there's just too many stressors coming in at this point. And even so, again, that's where I'm going at with that. So again, you can see where for women, this is typically going to be a little bit tougher. You can do it, but again, I think aggressive dieting is going to be better for men. But again, no matter what, leanness is going to be huge here. I think the leaner you are, the less aggressive we need to be with fat loss diet there. So again, the larger you are, again, men versus women, men are going to be, I'm going to push a little bit more for aggressive for men versus women. But again, generally speaking, the higher your body fat levels, the more aggressive we can be with it. And as you get leaner and leaner, the less aggressive we need to be. Again, most aggressive dieting strategies need to be short term, and this is a time where you could utilize things like refeed and diet break. So you could do super aggressive for a week or two and then implement a diet break, right? But either way, it needs to be like the amount of time that if we're going to be aggressive, the quicker the fat loss is, the weight loss is, the less aggressive or the shorter that time frame needs to be. And we probably need to implement more diet breaks and refeeds in that process. Now, 3 things you need to have if you're going to do aggressive dieting. We need protein. Okay, so you need to make sure you get enough protein if you're taking an aggressive dieting strategy approach. This is where you can utilize something like a protein sparing modified fast. But again, we need to have protein. So probably as high as possible, the more aggressive you are, and especially the leaner you get. Again, you can do this if you're lean, but just understand that you're going to put yourself at a higher risk here of losing lean body mass. Or as I had Kyle Baxter on the podcast, he tells me you can't lose muscle, you just burn it off for fuel. So we don't want to burn it off for fuel. We need resistance training, right? So we need to send that signal to build muscle or to keep it. And then lastly, we need enough micronutrients. So this is where you can utilize multivitamins. And then for the little amount of calories you have for aggressive dieting, you need to make sure you're eating whole foods and things like that. So that's my thoughts on aggressive dieting. That's who they're better for, who could use them, the time frame of them, and then also what you need to have in an aggressive dieting approach. All right, so last questions around refeeds. Again, so all this kind of ties in. So when and why are refeeds helpful in a fat loss phase? So they can be used. So let's quickly go over what they are here. I'm going to try to structure this in a way that makes sense. So fat loss dieting is tough. So I'm going to tie this into all this. So physically and mentally, right? Also the added pressure of trying to hit low calories day in and day out can add up. So you have one meal off or one bad day and you give up or you spin your wheels, right? So this is what I found to work with clients. We have refeed days. And again, refeed days are essentially just days at maintenance calories. We can just say maintenance calorie days. It could be 5-2 approach, 6-1, whatever it may be, and diet breaks, AKA days at your maintenance calories. Okay. So we're looking at getting to our maintenance calories throughout the diet, right? Versus, hey, I need to be in an energy deficit throughout. So example, you're doing 1,800 calories 5 to 6 times a week, and then 2,000 to 2,300 calories 1 to 2 times a week. And then a diet break would be weeks or more at maintenance calories there. So these can be used as a proactive tool or a reactive tool. Proactive, you plan X amount of refeed days per week. For example, planning 1 day at maintenance calories during fat loss. This helps you stick to your diet. Reactive, you use them when you feel like you need it, like you have high diet fatigue, super hungry, an event comes up. For example, you're feeling low energy, hungry, etc., and you decide to have a day or two at maintenance calories. They can also be helpful from a training performance standpoint if that's important to you, which when people are fat loss dieting, that should be important to us because we want to make sure that we're maintaining as much muscle as possible. And resistance training is going to do that. And if we can still push our training, that's going to make it more likely that happens. And for some people, they could potentially gain some muscle in that process. They're best for those who are lean and trying to get leaner. Okay, so if you're lean and you're trying to get leaner, you're definitely a good person to utilize them. And then women, right? And because I said women seem to have a larger stress response to fat loss dieting, having these days at maintenance calories can help offset some of that. I've seen it many times with female clients where like they've in the past, I never really realized what was going on. It's, oh, I'm done. Weight is just not moving. You give them a day where they eat closer to maintenance, add in some carbohydrates, takes a ton of stress off, boom, they lose like 3 or 4 pounds, right? Again, just that varies all over the place, but that's what I mean with that. It takes stress off the body. And they're not going to be for somebody who like is not actively dropping weight. If you're not actively dropping weight, you don't like, I don't think to me, it's not going to be as useful, right? So if you're someone who has to lose 30 plus pounds and you're not actively dropping weight, you don't really need a refeed. You need to work on your habits, right? You need to work on strategies to help you with adherence. Now, could those help you have 1 or 2 days? Yes. But again, they're going to be more useful for people who are already actively dropping weight. Because again, if you're not doing that, then you're just at your maintenance calories. You're spending multiple days at a deficit, and then you're just having days where you go off plan, right? So you need to be careful with that. You need to actively be dropping weight in this process for it to be useful. And yeah, just something that you would use there. So let's talk about 5 things that you need to know about them. Okay. So there's no magic fat loss benefit. It's more about the mental side of things. You aren't getting some magical fat loss benefit. Most of them benefits are mental, less hunger cravings, less food focus, more enjoyment. Now they did do some research that at the end of it, people that added in diet breaks or refeed days, they did have a small increase, not a small increase, but they maintained their total daily energy expenditure a little bit higher than people who didn't. And just people had less diet fatigue. Like I said, it probably helps with lean body mass. More time out of a deficit should be better for lean body mass. Plus days at maintenance calories or around them should help you push training. More muscle, retention of muscle, better look as you lose weight. Again, it can take stress off like I talked about. Constantly eating low calories is stress on the body, physically and mentally. This stress can cause water retention. Plus realizing you can eat a bit more makes it more likely you stick to it long term to actually see fat loss. It's not a free for all, so you have to be careful on those days that you don't just go crazy with it, because that's going to impact. Again, you could easily utilize these, put them in, and then you're not actually dropping weight. And that's why I say you need to actively be dropping weight for that to happen. And we can use them as often as we want. Because you're at maintenance calories, you can use them as often as you want. Just understand, the more often you use them, the longer it will take to get to your goal body fat. But in some cases, this is better than short crash dieting bursts, and then you end up being on and off and you don't actually drop weight long term. So they can be useful from that perspective. Tips to implement: get to your maintenance calories. If you go a little over, that's probably okay from time to time. But again, the further over you go, the more often you do it, that is going to really start to slow down fat loss. Keep protein the same on the days you add calories and increase via carbs and fats. Still have a good base of nutrient-dense whole foods. Still track, have some moderation. Again, no free for all. And then put them around tough training days there. So that's how I would use, why they're useful, how they can be useful, how to use them, everything like that. So let me know if you have any questions. That's it for this episode. If you found this podcast to be helpful in any way, please leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find this. Also, let me know if you like Jeff on 2 Shots of Espresso. If you haven't yet, give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff. That's where I'm most active on social media. If you also enjoy my process, enjoy how I work with clients, and you are interested in doing that, I have a free 30-minute strategy call for you. We can dive into your goals, where you want to go, how I can or can't help you, but at the very least, you will have a game plan moving forward of what you need to do there. So if you're interested in that, the link to that is in the show notes. That's it for now. I'll chat with you guys next time.